Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, and I am going to be discussing in this afternoon session China and Russia enter Caribbean waters, BRICS versus US on the brink of war. Now, as we have been reporting, Trinidad and Tobago is now officially in war mode. We are seeing, as it were, and there have been reports that Chinese and Russian vessels, warships, and war equipment are now stationed in the Caribbean waters, in the Caribbean region. Now, that should indicate to us that war is on the horizon, that this is not just a psychological war, but this is a real war that will be waged right here in the Caribbean waters. And we have to be now alert, and we've got to decide what actions we'll take if the unintended happens. Now, we have Chinese and Russian warships have entered the Caribbean as tensions rise between the BRICS alliance and the United States over Venezuela. Is the region becoming the next zone of war, and what could this mean for Trinidad, Guyana, and the wider Caribbean? Rumination News Network breaks down the growing power struggle and what's really at stake for Caribbean nations caught in the middle. Now, this is a very important story to see that right now they are seeing that warships, war equipment, war assets from Venezuela, from China and Russia can be seen in the Caribbean, which means therefore that there is going to be a showdown between Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. All right, that is what we are seeing. That is what the likelihood of what is going to happen is, actually trending and is positioning itself as a very, very serious and bellicose war. Now, this is a very interesting development and something that we need to analyze. And the Trinidadians and the Tobagonians are in a very serious, they're caught in the crosshairs in a very serious crisis. And we've got to pray for them because this is something that is not, normal for Caribbean citizens. We, even though we are bedeviled by myriad problems, we are not accustomed to war and to the consequences that war carries. We're not. And it seems to me that there is a lack of information. We're living in an era where even though we have all of these gadgets at our disposal, the internet, the World Wide Web, as they have suggested, and we think that we are properly informed, we are living in an era, that's the irony of it, where we're not properly informed. We're not properly informed. And as a result of that, many of us are going to find ourselves in very thick waters and under very dire circumstances. Now, let us listen to this gentleman who is talking about the war and some of the consequences and what Trinidad is doing and the consequences that might follow. I did have also another lady that I need to look for, another Trinidadian who spoke about some of the consequences of this impending war on the economy of Trinidad and also on the social cultural landscape of Trinidad and Tobago. So let me see if I can share this with you and listen to what this gentleman from Guyana is suggesting about the war. Let me see if I could make the screen bigger so that you can see what he here is suggesting. All right, let me see if I can go back to it.
The hurts and actions of rejection But instead,
let me begin with it again.
The massive military buildup in the Caribbean and off South America should have been met with words and actions of rejection. But instead, the very few that dare to speak are in full support of the American aggression. The Caribbean is the last paradise on earth. Kamala Vicessor, the Trinidad Prime Minister, let me warn you. You don't understand the rules of engagement. And let me take you back that when it was plastered all over the world that Exton conquered Guyana without firing a shot, I did not hear from you. I think you should go put on a pamper and get yourself a pacifier and go to bed. You know nothing about wars. And to the president of this nation, you call yourself the commanding chief. You too do not understand the rules of engagement. And if you think the war would end when the Americans invade, or if they invade Venezuela, remember what the Americans are saying. It's because of drugs. What if it is true that the drug lords are there? And after fighting, after the Venezuelans and the Americans fight, like soldiers in the day, the drug lords awake and start fighting like guerrillas at nights. Your borders are all open. I don't think you understand aggression. Be careful how you think and how you act. You do not understand. Let me repeat. You do not understand the rules of engagement. You know, the massive military buildup in the Caribbean and off South America should have been met.
Yes, let me turn this off. Let's just, applaud the gentleman for what he has done.
Very few.
For what he has exposed in terms of the military buildup in the Caribbean. He has mentioned that Kamala does not know how to negotiate, right? She's not experienced on that. She's obstinate, she's stubborn, and she's not a wise woman. She's not an elder. Well, she's not conducting herself as an elderly stateswoman, somebody who knows what she is about. She's not. And as a result of that, she's taking and plunging Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean by extension into dangerous waters. Because what is going to happen right now, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm perceiving, as I'm looking at it, as I look at it deeply, is that this is going to be a military showdown between the BRICS nations of China and Russia. And we don't know what other nations might be involved if this war gets very dangerous. But it seems to me that behind the scenes, the United States is clear that it doesn't want any other global competitor in the region. So at this point in time, it's beyond the war on drugs, it's beyond just oil and gas, even though these are also credible pretexts on which to launch the war, if the war was ever sincere or real. But as I've told you, that all wars are a racket, okay? And including this one. And this is something that we have to understand, all right? This is something that we must understand, that all wars are racket. I was trying to look for a video, also a clip of a video that somebody from Trinidad had posted online, which is itemizing the consequences of the war in which Kamla Bisesor is trying to involve or to engage her citizens. I'm not sure if I can find that. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to locate that, but I'm trying to find it because I did download quite a number of videos and it seems like I'm not right. It's right here. It's right here. And I'm going to share this with you in terms of the war, the consequences that this war, if it is not stopped in its track, might cause. And I think she has sat down and she has carefully outlined some of the, terrible consequences of this war, which he titles Repercussions for TNT if there is a war, US-Venezuelan war. So let me share my screen with you now, and shall we now dive into the content of this video? All right? Please be as patient with me. Let me see if I can now make it a full screen and we will discuss. Let me just move back this here down here and start it.
It said that I would come back with a video pointing out the repercussions if US invades Venezuela, what would happen to Trinidad and Tobago. So I was going to give you a short version, but I changed my mind. I given only a little lengthy version of it, right? Because shortening it, I think it would do the message an injustice. So doing my little research, this is what I came up. Now, due to the support that Trinidad and Tobago government has been given to the US on the invasion of Venezuela, we would have immediate security and military threats. Direct risk of attack. Venezuela could target Trinidad oil and gas infrastructure, especially platforms near the maritime border, or even military or communication sites using missiles, drone, or naval forces. Civilian danger. Any strike, even limited, could endanger civilians in South and East Trinidad, given the proximity of less than 15 kilometers from Venezuela at some points. Emergency measures. Trinidad and Tobago would likely have to declare a state of emergency, activate Coast Guard and Air Guard patrols, and request protection or support from the US or regional allies. Now, another aspect that we have to look at is the US and allied involvement. Since Trinidad and Tobago be considered a partner or ally, the US would almost certainly defend or station forces in Trinidad and Tobago, possibly radar system and naval vessels or rapid deployment units. This would make Trinidad and Tobago a strategic military location, but also a military target for Venezuela. Are you hearing that, right? I hope you're listening. It would make a historic shift. Trinidad and Tobago moving from neutrality to becoming a part of a wartime coalition. Then we would have the economic fallout, energy sector disruption. Trinidad Atlantic LNG plant, oil refineries, and ports could become target or be shut down for safety. Investors' flight. Multinationals would evacuate personnel and suspend operation. Tourism collapse. Flights, cruises, and cargo shipping would halt. Regional travel would freeze. Inflation and shortages with trade disputed, food, fuel, and medicine shortages could emerge rapidly. Then we go to the humanitarian and civil impact. Mass evacuations. People living in areas like Point Fortin, Cedros, or Caracas might need to evacuate inland. Refugees reversal. Instead of Venezuelan fleeing to Trinidad and Tobago, some Trinidadians might have to flee north to Grenada or Barbados. Casualties and displacement. Even limited strikes could cause casualties and major infrastructure damages. Then we go to the diplomatic and international implications. CARICOM division. Some Caribbean states would condemn Venezuela. Others might call for peace, splitting the region politically. But where the CARICOM is concerned, we are only seeing Trinidad and Tobago, who is backing the US with this invasion into Venezuela. So we have the UN involvement. The UN and OAS would likely intervene diplomatically to prevent escalation. Trinidad and Tobago reputation. Trinidad would no longer be seen as a neutral Caribbean mediator. It would be viewed as aligned with US military interests. And then we have the long-term consequences. Post-war instability. Even after a ceasefire, Trinidad might face economic depression, militarization, and new regional rivalries. Social trauma, war panic, propaganda, and grief could shake public trust in government and institutions. Shift in alliances. Trinidad and Tobago might draw closer to US and NATO structures, ending its traditionally balanced foreign policy. So let me summarize this for you. If Venezuela strikes or even threatens Trinidad because it sided with the US, security risk, risk of direct attack, and militarization. Economy, collapse of trade, energy production, and tourism. Society, fear, displacement, and crisis management. Diplomacy, Trinidad would lose neutrality and be drawn deeper into global conflict. So Trinidad and Tobago, this is what happens when you chuck war, when you encourage a war. We will never, and I don't want to say never, never is a strong word, but for a very long time, we will have to be watching our backs with Venezuela, because after the war is over and the US gets what it wants, we are going to be left like sitting ducks, because overthrowing a regime, it doesn't mean that the political fanatics who was aligned to that regime disappears. They are still there. They still live in the country. And Kamala and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we will always have to be watching our backs with the Venezuelans. So Trinidad and Tobago, keep sitting down. Keep taking this thing as a joke, right? The joke is on us now, and we have to survive after this shit is over. So I want you all to ponder on what I said, and please speak out on what the US and what Kamala Persad is doing to our Caribbean, the beautiful islands. Speak out on it. You all need to get up, stand up, and start to ask for accountability, start to ask questions, and we have to ask it even harder. Because
Need I say any more? I think that she has summarized it. She has summarized it very well. Okay? I think that she did a beautiful summary of the repercussions. I'm unable to get this to close the screen. The repercussions of what will happen to Trinidad and Tobago should this war continue. All right? Should this war effort that they're doing continue? Something that we have to continue to examine and to watch. All right. But something that is very important that she said, and I've listened to other commentators, when the war is over, it doesn't mean therefore that the fanatics of Maduro would have left. Some of them will still be in Venezuela, and they will still continue to attack Trinidad and Tobago. And after the US gets what it wants, it will not be concerned about the security of Trinidadians and Tobagonians. They won't. Trust me, they will not be concerned after they have achieved what they want, what they desire. And I wonder if Trinidadians are understanding that. I wonder if they are, really coming to grips with that reality. I don't think many are. I think that we're thinking there's this island mentality that we have in the Caribbean, that, the United States is a liberator. And after she liberates us, then we are going to go back to business as normal. But that is not going to happen. And she talks about foreign policy. When we look at the whole matter of that Trinidad has, what you call it now, relationships, economic relationships, bilateral agreements with China. And I'm not sure if they have any with Russia. I don't think so, because the United States didn't want Russia, in recent times in the region. So it's a possibility that Trinidad doesn't have any bilateral agreement with Russia, but I'm sure they have, just like other members of the Caribbean bloc, the CARICOM member bloc, bilateral agreement with China. Now, what will happen, because there's going to be a showdown between China, Russia, and the United States over who is going to control this region. And that is what you have to understand, because China has multiple investments in the region, which she's also trying to secure. And she's going to call on the aid of Russia. My understanding is that there is going to be a planned war, a simultaneous war on Iran, on Venezuela, which that is a great tactic by the United States, because those two countries cannot help. Well, Iran will not be able to help Venezuela, because it will have to be engaged in that war that is happening simultaneously. The war on Venezuela, the war on Iran happening simultaneously. The United States is strategic. And people are distracted with regard to what is happening in Israel, in Palestine, and the Ukraine. So they're not even paying attention to what is happening here. Okay? And we have got to think, we have got to call on our government that we are living, or we desire to live, in a zone of peace and not a zone of war. Okay? And there was an article in the Guardian newspaper, the Trinidadian Guardian, this morning. I didn't want to share that with you because, I didn't want my video to be lengthy. I think that the people who spoke in the video, I think they spoke eloquently, and they expressed some very important issues that you should bear in mind. I was trying to look for the Trinidadian Guardian article that I actually, yeah, it's right here. And it's saying here, coming from the Trinidadian Guardian newspaper, it's saying that the title of the article that was posted, it's coming up on my internet, yeah, Foreign Policy Under Scrutiny as TNT Aligns with US on Bolivia. Okay, TNT's decision to co-sign a joint statement with the United States and several Latin American countries congratulating Bolivia's new president has sparked debate about the direction of TNT's foreign policy and its alignment within CARICOM. Former Jamaican ambassador and international relations consultant Curtis Ward described the move as unusual and precedent-setting. And I quote, this is coming from Ambassador Curtis Ward, and he is a former Jamaican ambassador, I think, to the United Nations. And he quotes here, and I begin the quote, "I find this alignment of a small number of conservative governments, which the TNT government has joined to congratulate the election of a center-right conservative government in Bolivia, should give other CARICOM members pause," Ward said. While it is normal in diplomatic circles to congratulate a successful candidate, it is highly unusual and probably unprecedented for a joint statement to be issued by like-minded governments. Most countries don't even go that far. And this is what is happening. Kamala Persad-Bissessar is actually on board with everything that the United States is doing with its foreign policy. And we know that, in Bolivia, there was a coup launched by the United States some years ago that evicted the then president, Evo Morales. Okay? Now we're seeing the same thing happening in Venezuela, supported by Trinidad and Tobago. So we know that CARICOM is about to die, because as both speakers have suggested, it is going to divide. Some countries are going to side with the United States, while some are going to side with, with whomever. They're going to be on the side of neutrality. Okay? So we have to understand, and we have to begin to examine what is going to happen now that Trinidad has given its green light for the United States to wage a war on Venezuela. I understand there was also a fighter jet aircraft that landed at the Charaguamos airport, or the Piarco airport in in Trinidad yesterday, or not sure when, but I could see it on the video. So the equipment, the military assets are there, and war is going to happen only if God avoids having it. He blocks it, he halts it. War is going to happen because people are stubborn, they don't want to listen. And I think it's time for Mrs. Piseso. I think it's time for her now to leave office, to demit that office, and to go home. I think it's time for her to do that. If she means her country well, if she is patriotic, and she wishes the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago well, I think that it is full time that Madame Prime Minister demits office. And somebody was telling me yesterday, well, choose your word carefully. I'm choosing my words carefully. She should demit office. Not that should be done by force. It should be done by her own volition. Okay, she should decide to do that because she understands that this is too much for her. She's in her 70s, I understand. This is too much pressure for her at her age to be enduring. So why force this sort of pretense? Why pretend to do something or to, be able to be an effective prime minister when she can't be at this age? Plus, she doesn't seem to have the competency that is needed to navigate the dangerous waters in which the Caribbean and specifically Trinidad finds itself in at the moment. Mrs. Prime Minister, please do us the honorable deed and demit that noble office so that somebody whom God will impress with his wisdom will be able to navigate and to shepherd the ship of Trinidad into safer harbor. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the video so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. Thank you so much again for joining, and be well. And, I can only pray for the children, for the citizens rather, of Trinidad and Tobago. My prayers, and you are in my thoughts. Be confident, even though you are experiencing a time of great anxiety.